Bonus Chapter 3, The Land in the Sky. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. December 4, 2017. Bonus Chapter 3, The Land in the Sky. Once I finished making my snack, a lettuce and tomato sandwich, and poured myself another hot cocoa. I couldn't help drinking these even if the weather was above average. I returned to my recliner, sat back down, and opened up the Hyrule Historia to continue reading about various legends. Picking up my bookmark, I twirled it about in my fingers for a few moments whilst making a final decision on what to read next. I had thought about looking up the ancient past just to see what I could learn of the early days the land known as Hyrule was first created. Hesitation made me reconsider and instead keep on going. Shaking my head, I decided to go with my gut and focus on the ancient past. I had actually read about some of it before in the older edition of the Historia, but had since forgotten about it, forcing me to read through it again. I supposed it wasn't a bad thing, as it would enable me to familiarize myself again and perhaps get a much better understanding of the lore. Flipping back to the table of contents, the first chapter listed was simply known as The Beginning. It was only a few pages long. I was surprised about that, but perhaps it would lead directly into the chapter that followed. Turning to the start of the first chapter, it said that back in the beginning, there was nothing but darkness, an empty void of nothingness. No one knew or even tried to understand how long it had been this way. It was beyond their means, but what is known is that 3 divine beings descended down from the heavens, their true forms far too complex for mortal minds to even begin to comprehend, so they were depicted as golden divas. The first was Din, goddess of power, the second Nehru, goddess of wisdom, and the third Far-Ro-Ray, goddess of courage. Each goddess contributed their power into the creation of a land that reflected their desire to watch over something of their own design. Din used her flaming arms to create the very land itself. It made sense that she was capable of this, as she did represent power, and that was when I stopped reading upon the realization that Ganondorf's immense power came directly from Din. But, he also had the power of the other 2 goddesses flowing through him. I chose to continue reading, otherwise I would only be confusing myself even more. Nehru poured her wisdom into the land to bring about law, whilst Far-Ro-Ray created beings who were to uphold the law. Compared with Din, the other 2 goddesses didn't contribute as much from a grand perspective, yet their efforts would prove invaluable over time. With their labor completed, the great goddesses as they came to be known returned to the heavens, but not before leaving behind a little something to give the creatures that had been created a means of giving them hope, though this has yet to be proven. They created the Triforce, an ancient relic that contained the power of the goddesses, and whoever possessed it could alter reality and have their fondest wishes come true. As a protective measure, a restriction was put in place preventing the goddesses or any other divine being from using the relic for their own purposes, thus only mortals could use it. There were 3 pieces of the Triforce, each representing one of the great goddesses and contained a portion of their power. The Triforce of power represented Din and was filled with the embodiment of her supremacy. Those who believed power meant everything would seek out this Triforce, and procuring it would result in Din's blessings. The Triforce of wisdom represented Nehru, and whoever possessed it would be imbued with endless wisdom whilst being blessed by the goddess herself. Finally, the Triforce of courage represented Far-Ro-Ray and would instill one with valor, the likes of which no one had ever seen before, that couldn't be rivaled to whoever wielded it. Looking up from the page, I gulped when I finished reading that last sentence. Ganondorf believed in power more than anything else, so when he acquired the Triforce of power, his already immense strength was augmented even further thanks to Din's essence, yet how did he acquire both wisdom and courage despite not believing in those? I gazed down at my hand and watched as the mark of the Triforce of courage faintly appeared before disappearing again. I was beginning to understand why it had chosen me, as I had displayed tremendous valor, but did that mean Princess Twilight possessed enough wisdom to give her the Triforce of wisdom? So many questions flowed through my mind, yet there were little to no answers for them. I mean, I was only assuming that Her Highness still possessed the Triforce of wisdom, as I hadn't seen the mark appear on the back of her hand since my journey through Hyrule. Did Ganondorf know about it? That would explain why he began tormenting her, though if that were the case, it would break my heart knowing Princess Twilight was now personally involved in my nightmare. Again, this was all speculation and couldn't be revealed until I knew more. I resumed reading, though with more worry in my mind as a result of knowing more than before. The great goddesses were aware that the Triforce could be seen as a temptation for those who sought its power for evil purposes, and knew something needed to be done to prevent individuals with that nature from having their wishes fulfilled. To that end, they entrusted Hylia, a fellow goddess who was also their servant, to guard the Triforce from evil minds. Unless they absolutely needed to get involved, Hylia had complete authority over the land. The final resting place of the Triforce became known as the Sacred Realm, a land that was said to be of an eternal beauty, yet only a few had ever seen it in its true splendor before it became corrupted over time. For a few centuries, Hylia would rule over the land as a guiding light, and the creatures who had been created by Far-Ray began to develop in their own ways. The Hylians, the humans of this land, were the closest to the goddess, and she in turn viewed them as her children that she would protect always. Other types of creatures soon appeared, though while they were devoted to her, they didn't have as strong a connection to Hylia. These creatures included the Gorons, surprised that they go that far back, the Kikwai, the Magmas, the Parellas, and most surprisingly, a large assortment of ancient robots. Unfortunately, such peaceful times wouldn't last forever. There were a few mild conflicts that occurred between the tribes, though Hylia was quick to resolve them before they could spiral out of control, yet there was one conflict that occurred which no one was prepared for. Rumors of the Triforce's power to grant anyone's fondest desire quickly spread to the underground until they reached the ears of an ancient evil who had been stirring since time began. His name was Demise, known as the Demon King, and he sought the power of the Triforce in his bid to conquer the world. Why does he sound an awful lot like Ganondorf for some reason? One day on the surface, the land wasn't named Hyrule until much later a fissure appeared in the ground, and from it came an assortment of demonic creatures bent on destroying everything in their path. Leading them was Demise himself, wielding a sword that was said to contain a spirit whose loyalty to him was absolute. News quickly reached the ears of Hylia that the world entrusted to her was under attack, and so she decided to prepare her people for the upcoming battle. All of the tribes were willing to fight in her name, but she realized there was one she couldn't see getting caught in the conflict. Because of their strong connection to her, Hylia didn't wish for the Hylians to suffer. Unfortunately, most of them were killed by the onslaught of monsters coming from the underworld, and so she decided to save the remaining survivors whilst also making sure that the Triforce didn't fall into Demise's hands. If he were to claim the Triforce, nothing would have been able to stop him, not even Hylia herself, so she began formulating a series of plans of varying degrees designed to take all possible accounts into situation. She began by gathering the remainder of her people to the temple that had served as her home.
Are you the only ones who managed to survive the onslaught from the demonic hordes? Yes, Your Grace. I had expected more of you, my beloved people. Those demons surprised us and we were slaughtered before we could fight back. Never have we seen creatures such as they infest these lands, but judging from the saddened expression upon your face, you seem to know what they are, Your Grace. They are creatures that have thrived in the darkest depths of the underworld since time began. From the beginning, they remained down there in their dark quarters, corrupting every last fiber of their wretched domain, longing for a time where they could come up here to the surface and plunge into an eternal darkness. Unfortunately, that time has come now, and it is by my own weakness as your guidance that they have come here. What do you mean? They seek the power I have watched over as commanded by the great goddesses.
Once again, I had to stop on account of recognizing a familiar face. At first, I thought that I was looking at Vice Principal Luna, but I realized that it was Nightmare Moon who was portraying the goddess, Hylia. The last time I read the Hyrule Historia, I remembered seeing her portraying Hylia, though I thought it odd someone with her nature would be cast as a kind, benevolent being, whose purpose was to guide those under her divine protection. If Princess Twilight were looking at this right now, she would have thrown a conniption fit at the very least, given that someone as evil as Nightmare Moon was being treated as a goddess. The one speaking to Hylia was someone I didn't recognize straight away, as I had never really paid much attention to his legend. Good thing Princess Twilight was very extensive when she told me about the Pillars of Equestria, who once defended the kingdom until they made the ultimate by banishing themselves to limbo for 1,000 years until she reversed the spell, freeing them all without their consent and fighting alongside them. Rockhoof, the largest member, was said to have dug an entire moat using only his strength and a shovel, saving his entire village from lava that had erupted from a nearby volcano. He used to be a scrawny pony, who dreamed of becoming part of something he called the Mighty Helm, but was rejected by its members on account of him not having the right fortitude, though they were the one that gave him his famous shovel. Through some divine intervention, or either magic or simply a freak accident, he changed and became a much stronger pony, resulting in him saving his village and being recognized by the Helm before getting accepted into their ranks. That's all Princess Twilight said about him, though I had to question his transformation, if only because it sounded really weird. But, who was I to judge when I could transform as well, though not to that extent? Rockhoof's jaw dropped.
They seek out the golden power that can grant the wishes of he who touches it.
Nightmare Moon slowly nodded in sadness.
Demise, the demon king of the underworld, will not rest until he has the Triforce in his hands. Because of his merciless ambition, innocent lives have been lost, lives that I could have saved had I been better prepared. He and his demonic horde have been targeting you, those who have the strongest connection to me, because of that connection, and it has cost me nothing but pain seeing you being cut down under the swath of evil. For that, I shall make right by doing what I must to prevent any more of you from losing your lives. What did you have in mind? Though it pains me to consider it, I must march forward and meet the Demon King in battle.
Rockhoof's eyes lit up, though he quickly realized that he was the only one who felt that way.
Why aren't the rest of you excited at the prospect of going headlong into battle fighting by the side of her grace, the goddess Hylia? I for one would deem it an immense honor to be able to fight alongside she who has guided us since time immemorial.
The rest of the Hylians weren't as thrilled about Rockhoof's love of battle and merely stared at one another until someone from the back called out before walking up to the front of the gathering. They didn't seem afraid to express their opinion, and I was surprised that this person was none other than Twilight Velvet. She was Princess Twilight's, also Twilight Sparkle's mother, who had a rather active lifestyle many never would have expected. Why would she have been here portraying one of the ancient Hylian people? Wouldn't it have made sense had she portrayed someone from further ahead in the timeline?
What makes you think this way, Rockhoof?
Twilight Velvet asked.
The honor of fighting by her grace is one we shouldn't ignore.
Twilight Velvet walked up to Rockhoof and slapped him in the face with such force that he stumbled back slightly before regaining his composure.
You've been harping on about that nonsense ever since those demonic creatures first crawled out from that hole in the ground. I know you possess a warrior's spirit and all, but the rest of us aren't exactly known for our fighting prowess. The reason most of us have died is because we're easy pickings for those accursed monsters. Which is why we must fight back. Are you being serious?
Rockhoof nodded.
I've never been more serious of anything, Twilight Velvet. We humans have been suffering as a result of this demonic invasion, and we must do what we can to fight back, otherwise we will be wiped out.
He then turned towards Nightmare Moon, who had kept herself out of the debate on account that it was beneath her status.
Her grace cannot push this horde back on her own, which is why she needs her people to help her succeed in saving this land. I know my words come as being crazy if not insane, but we must fight for the land which has been our home for as long as we can remember.
Twilight Velvet sighed.
Then you will be on your own, as will her grace. You would abandon her grace? No.
Twilight Velvet answered.
But, I do know that we're completely outmatched by those demonic monsters. Heck, we're outmatched by the other tribes. In case you didn't notice, they have been developing unique attributes that make them stand out compared to us. The best we can do is being similar in appearance to her grace. Besides, you underestimate her grace, as she is far stronger than any other being. Are you saying we are weak?
Twilight Velvet shook her head.
No, but we're no match for them.
That was when Nightmare Moon finally raised her hand to silence both Rockhoof and Twilight Velvet.
There is no need for you to continue this senseless bickering. While it is true you, those closest to me, do not have the kinds of abilities the other tribes possess, you do possess an important trait they could never possess. You possess the means to continue going and become even more than what you are.
She looked at Twilight Velvet first.
I will not be on my own as you claim against our enemies.
She then looked at Rockhoof.
I shall have those fighting by my side against the demons. What do you mean?
Rockhoof asked.
The other tribes shall join me in battle against the Demon King. And us. You will be far away from here. I don't understand.
Nightmare Moon looked up at the sky, prompting the Hylians to do the same.
There is a reason why I gathered you all here to my temple. Because of the assault carried out by the servants of the Demon King, you who are closest to me, have dwindled in number and now are on the verge of being wiped out. I will not allow this to happen, and so I shall enact a plan that will protect you from their wrath. It will mean giving up my temple, but then it is a noble sacrifice I am willing to take if it means your ensured survival.
One Hylian then spoke out.
Will you protect your temple from the demons?
Another spoke.
Do you have enough power, your grace?
Yet another spoke.
I hope this will keep us safe from those things.
A fourth Hylian then said something.
Why did this have to happen?
That's when Rockhoof finally spoke up after hearing his fellow Hylians.
What is this plan of yours, your grace? I shall use my divine power to raise my temple and the surrounding land into the sky. You shall all be inside of the temple when this comes to pass.
Nightmare Moon answered.
You shall be safe from the terrible conflict that shall occur soon enough. I have failed you, and thus many of you perished by these demons, and so I must ensure not only your future but those of the future generations of your kind.
Twilight Velvet smiled.
If this is what her grace wishes, then so be it.
Rockhoof was devastated.
No. Your grace. Surely you do not mean this.
Nightmare Moon nodded.
My wish is to see you protected from the demons who have slaughtered many of your kind. You may not understand now, Rockhoof, but in time you will come to appreciate and even accept this decision. Now, be prepared to be transported up to the sky. This will require me to expend much of my divine power, but it shall be worth it. Perhaps one day your descendants will return to the surface and begin your lives anew, but for now you shall remain up there amongst the clouds. Do you have any last requests, Your Grace?
Twilight Velvet asked.
Let the history of the surface be forever lost to your descendants.
Nightmare Moon answered.
To protect them from the truth until the time is right, they must never know what exists down here, lest they too be destroyed by the demons. Always remember that I shall watch over you no matter what becomes of me. Though it pains me to have to do this, it is necessary to ensure the future of this world and what you shall come to accept in due course.
Despite Rockhoof's protests, Hylia commanded her people to take refuge in the temple. The temple of Hylia was very easy to recognize as it comprised of a giant statue that was built in her likeness surrounded by ruins that gave off an ancient vibe. The other tribes sometimes came to visit to pay their respects, yet it was the Hylians who visited frequently because of their connection to Hylia. The statue of the goddess itself was truly a remarkable sight to behold, carved in ancient times by the first creatures who walked on the surface, and was viewed as the heart and soul of her temple. Focusing her efforts, Hylia concentrated her power and the ground began to tremble. The temple and the surrounding area lifted itself from the ground and it continued to rise until the island disappeared completely. Though it pained her immensely, Hylia knew that this was for the best for her people. There were other islands that she sent upwards in hopes her people would one day inhabit them, but what was most important was that they were safe from Demise and his demonic horde who continued causing destruction to the surface world. However, Hylia discovered something unexpected the instant her temple disappeared.
Did you honestly think I would flee?
Nightmare Moon was shocked.
Rockhoof! What are you doing here? Your Grace, I couldn't stand by and not fight by your side.
Rockhoof answered.
I know that I should have stayed with the others, but my place is here by your side. You may punish me in any way that you see fit for defying a divine command, but know that I chose to remain here of my own free will. Even if my life becomes forfeit, I cannot abandon she who has guided us since we first learned to walk. Such a stubborn creature you are. I do not regret my decision. And yet your loyalty and admiration deserves respect. I am yours to do with as you wish.
Nightmare Moon smiled.
Then I hereby name you as my chosen champion, he who fights in the name of the goddess Hylia. When I have gathered the remaining tribes together, I want you there on the front lines with me when the demonic horde led by the Demon King present themselves. I shall prepare you clothing worthy of a champion and gift upon a sword and shield that shall protect you in the battle to come. I shall also prepare a very special gift, one that no being in this world has ever seen before. It will be something of a unique artifact whose appearance will become clear. I shall serve you well, Your Grace.
I didn't think that Hylia would send the Hylians up into the sky like that and giving them a small piece of land, but she wanted to protect them at all costs from Demise, so I couldn't blame her for such an act of desperation. It says here that it took a couple of generations for the Hylians to get used to their new life, but over time they completely forgot about the world that existed below the clouds. But, to have them forget would have meant abandoning their ancestry, and so the decision was made where Hylia instructed a few Hylians to keep records regarding the surface in hopes one day someone would figure out the records and return to the surface. Unbeknownst to the Hylians, Hylia secretly added some additional measures to ensure the safety of her people. First, she created a cloud barrier that separated the sky from the surface, which preventing Demise and his demonic horde from being able to reach the Hylians. However, this also prevented them from returning to the surface. The only way anyone could break through the barrier would be if they were chosen by Hylia. The other tribes over time would soon forget that the Hylians ever existed, though they themselves had issues that stemmed from the aftermath of what was described as the ancient battle between good and evil. The other measure carried out by Hylia was one her people never knew about. Knowing that she couldn't protect the Triforce whilst fighting alongside the other tribes, she secretly hid it somewhere on the island that would become the Hylians' new home. To ensure that only her chosen hero would be able to access the golden power should he have need of it, she placed each piece behind a portal located in a place called the Sky Keep, whose location remained a secret. Again, only her chosen hero would know how to reach it. A footnote said the keep was below the statue dedicated to Hylia, though why have such an important place there? Finally, Hylia enshrined her sword within the statue of the goddess for her chosen hero to wield it when the time came for him to appear. It says also that Hylia was a skilled musician and was known for possessing a golden harp which she used to play songs of unparalleled beauty for her people. She believed that her chosen hero would have better use of it than she would, so she enshrined it on the island her people lived on until needed once again. With all of that taken care of, Hylia was able to join the other tribes on the surface in the battle against the demonic horde led by Demise, who was unaware of what she had done. The man who chose to remain behind instead of living with the other Hylians became known as Hylia's chosen champion and was said to have protected her from harm using the equipment she had bestowed upon him. Her champion proved himself a valiant warrior who was able to overcome many of the demonic forces of Demise and was said to have wielded an item personally made for him by the goddess known as the sailcloth, a worthy distinction. No one knew what became of him, as historians have yet to find, but his legacy would continue to live on forever long after death had claimed his life. Soon, Hylia and the other tribes would come face to face with the demonic horde, with Demise himself leading them, and the battle would soon begin that would determine the course of history that would follow afterwards. Turning the page, I found myself on the next chapter, known as The Legend of Skyloft, where it continued on from where the previous one ended. Was the name of the island the Hylians were on when Hylia sent it upwards called Skyloft? It sounded rather majestic, though kind of predictable in a sense. There was an image of Demise detailing what he looked like, and I almost dropped the book out of shock. He bore such a close resemblance to Ganondorf that I could have sworn they were related to one another in some way or were the same person. A footnote mentioned about seeing the end of the chapter to find out what became of him, so I chose to keep that in mind. He certainly looked formidable, what with his impressive build coupled with the sword in his hand that looked like it had been forged from darkness itself. Before the battle began, Demise and Hylia had a conversation between one another that showed just how psychotic he was, what with wanting to know what became of the Hylians and the Triforce.
So, you are the goddess who protects the golden power that I seek. I know that you are the leader of the demonic horde that has slaughtered countless lives.
Nightmare Moon said.
Yes. My minions have certainly left their mark on this pathetic world. If you value the existence of these pitiful creatures who stand behind you, you shall tell me where I can find the location of the Triforce. Do not attempt to deceive me, goddess, as I know the Ancient Ones entrusted its safety to you when they returned to the heavens. I would advise you answer me, or else there will be a tremendous surge of blood as those creatures become corpses. Threats pose no meaning to me, demon. Do you believe yourself capable of defeating me, goddess? I do. Then you are overestimating your power along with those of the creatures who fight by your side.
I had no idea who was portraying Demise, so I looked through my magic journal at what Princess Twilight described about what had been going on back in Equestria. Nothing came to mind at first until a description of the evil the pillars of Equestria had banished sounded similar to the appearance of the one portraying Demise. Her Highness described this evil as a force that corrupted ponies by promising them great power and was known as the Pony of Shadows. Hey! That sounded like a scary story Princess Celestia once told me, though I largely ignored it, thinking her foolish, but perhaps I should have paid closer attention.
Why do you seek the Triforce?
The Pony of Shadows laughed in response.
Why? Why? Because I desire to conquer this world and make it into my own domain. Long have I wanted a reason to come to this surface world, and my reason came when news reached me of a divine relic that could grant the wishes of any who placed their hands upon it. You shall never get your hands on the Triforce.
Again, the Pony of Shadows laughed.
You amuse me, goddess. I can sense the fear stemming forth from you, and it becomes more delectable with every passing second. Your desire to protect these pitiful creatures is a sign of weakness, and the fear of losing them makes you question your abilities. The tribes of this land and I shall drive back your demonic forces.
Nightmare Moon said defiantly.
And you yourself shall forever be banished, where you will never cause pain and suffering to others again. Despite having watched over these tribes since time began, I am very proficient in the ways of fighting. Thus, you should not underestimate me, Demise, or else your servants shall think of you as weak. Where are they? Who? The humans who were attached to you the most.
The Pony of Shadows answered.
I do not see them amongst the gathering of creatures you have assembled. Could it be that you attempted to hide them from me? How unfortunate, as they proved to be excellent fodder for my minions to slaughter. Their screams even now continue to be heard in your ears, correct? Try as you might, you cannot block out such screams. Perhaps you could replace them with the screams that will come from what is sure to be a bloody massacre. I could slaughter each of you, but that would deny my horde a desire to do that. They are away from your grasp and you will never find them.
The Pony of Shadows chuckled under his breath as he drew out his sword from a scabbard that was attached to his leg.
Is that a fact? A pity, as I enjoyed killing so many of them. It wasn't as though they were a challenge, as they fell to my blade so easily, a sign that they were easy prey. He then licked the tip of his sword before striking the ground, resulting in a tremor that nearly knocked everyone to the ground. Look at how your chosen fear what I am. Do you truly think they are worthy? I suppose our answer will come soon enough. Now, I shall ask you once again, Goddess. Where are your precious humans? Where is the Triforce?
Nightmare Moon refused to answer him, resulting in the Pony of Shadows giving her a smirk before he turned his attention towards a pair of Gorons and a Magma. The three didn't even have a chance to retaliate when he suddenly raised his sword, resulting in lightning striking down from above onto the blade, charging it with electrical power. He swung his sword at them, where they were electrocuted and died instantly, much to Nightmare Moon's horror. She had once again witnessed innocent lives being lost as a result of the Pony of Shadows, and she felt a rage burning inside her which didn't exist until that precise moment. The Gorons and Magmas mourned the deaths of their comrades and were about to launch an attack of their own when Nightmare Moon raised her hand, signaling them not to lash out in anger, as she knew they would merely be throwing away their lives. Instead, she used her hand to make gestures indicating when they were to attack upon her, giving a signal. Despite their rage, they abided by her decision and waited. The Pony of Shadows laughed at such a display and snapped his fingers before looking at one of his demonic minions. The demon lunged forward and instantly skewered a Kikwai in cold blood before anyone even knew what happened. Seeing the innocent Kikwai brutally murdered was enough to make Nightmare Moon react in rage.
Stop this! Why are you doing this? Until you give me the answers I seek, I will continue cutting down these pathetic creatures. Then I have no other choice. You acquiesce. Even if it costs me my life, you must be defeated.
The Pony of Shadows laughed once more.
Then you are willing to throw away your very existence? I cannot see you doing such a thing, Goddess.
He aimed his sword at the tribes who stood behind Nightmare Moon, prompting her to look in their direction.
These creatures have relied on you ever since the gods of old created this land with their power. To die here would mean them no longer having you to guide their pathetic existence. You may be a goddess, but such a sacrifice to best me would result in their eventual destruction. I had thought you different from the old gods and merely stood aside whilst your creatures would fight on your behalf.
Nightmare Moon raised her sword, not her goddess sword but a different one she had on her person, and swung it downward.
Then your assumptions about me were wrong, demon, a costly mistake I am certain. The tribes of this land shall continue on whether I live or die here. They possess the means to push themselves to far greater things, more so than even I would have expected. You and your kind only see them as worthless, while I see them as having great potential. Are you willing to die? I am.
This left the Pony of Shadows in quite the predicament. He had hoped for Nightmare Moon to give in to despair and reveal to him what he wanted to know. Not even killing those who were willing to fight on her behalf was enough to make her reveal the location of both the Hylians and the Triforce. While he could have easily slaughtered the tribes and leave Nightmare Moon barely clinging on to life, he needed to make sure she didn't die before answering him. Against his own nature, she needed to live for the time being. He considered throwing his demonic horde at her in hopes they would overpower her, but he knew better than that. Unlike the tribes, Nightmare Moon's power was far superior than all of them combined. Whilst he had no problem sacrificing his horde for the sake of victory, he wanted to cause as much chaos as possible before conquering the world. It was at that moment when the Pony of Shadows noticed that Nightmare Moon's temple was missing. He had caught glimpses of it during his initial rampage. The size of the statue could be seen practically anywhere given how big it was, and the large crater where it used to be led him to suspect what she did to hide the Hylians and the Triforce away from him, though he wasn't sure of the latter. In his mind, he thought Nightmare Moon to be quite clever, sending the Hylians away and out of his reach. However, he also thought that she was merely delaying the inevitable. It would be only a matter of time before the Hylians would one day come back, as their innate curiosity would compel them to seek out the truth. He knew now that he would never get any answers from the goddess, so instead he chose to focus on slaughtering the tribes and Nightmare Moon. One demon suddenly leapt forward in a bid to kill another Kikwai, yet Nightmare Moon responded quickly by slicing its neck off its head, killing it instantly. And yet, this was what the Pony of Shadows was waiting for. He lunged forward himself and managed to grab her from behind before she could do anything. The tribes attempted to make a move in a bid to save her, only for them to suddenly stop when Nightmare Moon suddenly had the Pony of Shadows sword up against her throat.
You continue to surprise me with your attempts, goddess. Who would have guessed that you sent those humans away whilst they were within your precious temple? What? Yes. I know what you have done now.
The Pony of Shadows said.
To keep them from my grasp, you sent them into the clouds where my horde cannot reach. Such an act of desperation to keep them away from the slaughter to come, yet one that proves how you care for such pathetic creatures. It would seem that I have answered one of my own questions, leaving the most important one remaining. Where did you hide it, the Triforce? Perhaps it is hidden with those humans? If so, then they are unaware of what they have amongst them. I shall have to find a means of getting up there and take it for myself.
That was enough to push Nightmare Moon over the edge, and she responded by spinning her sword around and plunging it into the pony of Shadow's chest. He released his hold on her and staggered back, clutching his stomach. It was bleeding, while she turned around and stood in front of the other tribes.
While you may now know where the humans are, you will never reach them so long as I and those who fight alongside me shall live. Then you will all die. For the future of this land, you must be cast aside.
The ancient battle between the forces of the goddess Hylia and the demon king Demise shook the very foundation of the surface to its core. Both sides engaged one another in a blood-soaked conflict that saw countless lives being lost on both sides, with neither willing to surrender an inch. Not only were lives being lost, but the land itself was being ravaged to the point where nothing could ever sustain itself there again. For a time, the demonic horde had superior numbers, as whenever one was killed, another would immediately take its place, yet this didn't serve to slow down the forces under Hylia's command. Ever by her side was her chosen champion, who, as previously stated, had killed large swathes of the demonic horde using his natural skills as a fighter. Some historians believed his presence enabled Hylia's forces to avoid being completely obliterated, as most of them weren't fighters like he was. It was said the champion inspired the tribes to continue the battle, as their very future was hanging in the balance, and Hylia herself proved no slouch either. Her divine power was a bane to the horde, as Demise forced them to keep going or else be killed by him, leaving them with little option but to throw themselves into the fire. It soon became clear to Hylia that her forces simply couldn't kill Demise, as he was simply far too powerful, and killing his horde meant nothing as they kept on coming. Her only option was to use a form of containment in hopes of sealing away his power. In the waning days of the battle, Hylia put her plan into motion, where she drove the Demon King into a prison located at the site where her temple used to be. Despite her temple no longer being there, her divine power could still be felt, and she believed it would be enough. Using all of her power, Hylia sealed the prison, thereby imprisoning Demise within it. As a result of the Demon King being sealed within what became known to historians as the Sealed Grounds, the demonic horde's confidence waned, allowing Hylia's forces to turn the tide of battle, leaving them no choice but to flee for their lives. The remnants of the horde scattered themselves far and wide across the surface and would form small bands, with survival being their one true objective, though it meant occasionally fighting against other groups and what remained of the tribes. It was said that Demise was forced to change as a result of being imprisoned and became an abomination of his physical form. No one knew how long this battle lasted, but the general consensus is that it lasted roughly a month, though no evidence has been proven of it. However long it was, the fact was that it had caused widespread devastation that would forever change everything on the surface. The Gorons and Kikwai were almost wiped out, leaving few of their numbers left to try and forge a path forward, while the Magmas, Parellas, and the ancient robots didn't suffer as many casualties, though they still lost many of their kind. And then there were the Hylians, who were safe within the veil of clouds that existed above. I had hoped Hylia would prevail, as the thought of a monster like Demise getting his hands on the Triforce would have been absolutely devastating. Suddenly, a footnote caught my attention and was accompanied by an image of a figure who looked rather effeminate in appearance. It said before he was sealed away, Demise left behind his sword in hopes that one day it would free him from his imprisonment. Contained within the sword was a spirit known as Gairahim, a self-proclaimed demon lord, who began making plans to resurrect his master when the proper time came. Many of the remnants of the demonic horde swore loyalty to him, though against their free will. While not as strong as his master, Gairahim was an expert swordsman. He was a sword spirit after all, though his temperament was said to have been erratic. No one, be they friend or foe, know what to expect from him when it came to his temperament, so they took precautions in case he was in a particularly bad mood. Sometimes he would fly in a murderous rage, while other times he came off as having a good sense of humor. Like the other demons, Gairahim couldn't break through the cloud barrier Hylia had created to protect the Hylians, so he didn't bother to make any attempt to break through. The battle now won, the tribes had hoped Hylia would once again guide them as she had done since they first appeared on the surface. Unfortunately, the goddess sustained grave injuries against Demise, not fatal, and while she could have kept on going like they wanted, she knew that her efforts had been in vain. Demise was gone, but there was no telling how long the seal she had created would last. His power would clash against his imprisonment, and one day would result in his eventual escape. Knowing that his escape would result in untold destruction in his bid to conquer the surface, Hylia had no other choice but to rely on a final gambit. Surrounded by a few Gorons and Magmas, Nightmare Moon told them of dire news.
It appears that my efforts to contain the evil of Demise was in vain.
One of the Gorons then spoke out.
What do you mean, Your Grace? The seal which I placed upon him will not last forever. What's the problem in that? It means that we don't have to worry about it ourselves, and future generations will take care of it. After all, you will be there to guide them, Your Grace, so if anything, they're in safe hands. If my plan is to be carried out, Limestone Pie, then I will not be there to guide them.
I had to stop upon recognizing one of Pinkie Pie's older sisters, Limestone Pie. While I'm not surprised that she was portraying a Goron it matched with Pinkie herself, I was surprised that she would be here rather than further on in the timeline alongside her sisters. Unlike Maud, who was stoic in her personality, and Pinkie being completely random, Limestone Pie could be best described as an eternal grump who complained about everything even when it didn't make sense. No matter what anyone tried to say, she would respond in an insulting manner that would cause her friction amongst others including her own family. Pinkie was often willing to look past Limestone's attitude though she struggled at times to ignore it. Limestone Pie wasn't the only one there of the Pie family. Standing next to her with a muffled look on her face was Marble Pie, also portraying one of the Gorons. She was known as the quiet one of the four sisters in that she rarely said anything, but when she did, it was always seen as a miracle given her shy nature. Then there were the Mogmas, mole-like creatures who could dig through dirt using sharp claws, though a footnote stated they used special digging mitts to dig around for treasure. Despite their gruff appearances, they had a friendly demeanor, though when it came to treasure, they would gladly betray someone for it. As for the other tribes, the Kikwai were a race of animal-like creatures who were also part plant in that they had plant-like material on their bodies in addition to having a large bud sprouting from their backs. They could use this bud to suddenly produce a bush which they used to disguise themselves to hide from predators due to being cowardly in nature. If that's the case, then how could have battled alongside Hylia against the demonic horde of Demise? Moving along, the next tribe were the Parella, aquatic creatures who looked like either a seahorse, a jellyfish, or perhaps even both, and naturally, lived in watery areas. Due to their lack of bone structure, they could squeeze into places other creatures couldn't, making them versatile when it came to hiding. They were also adept swimmers despite not having actual fins, but who am I to judge? Finally, there were the ancient robots who were, well, robots. How could futuristic technology exist within a fantasy setting? It says here that they were powered by something called a time-shift stone which flourished in the location they dwelled in, but over time, their territory became barren due to their resources getting depleted, resulting in them shutting down and becoming forgotten relics. Focusing back on what I was supposed to be reading, I couldn't help but be curious about the other tribes. I noticed that one of the Mogmas was filthy rich, which definitely caught me by surprise. He was a rich tycoon who desired for camp ever free to be converted into a spa, thus making him a sort of catalyst who drove Gloriosa Daisy into wanting to do what was necessary to protect the camp. Luckily, his plan was thwarted, though I doubt he is willing to change any time soon. A shame really, as I heard from Princess Twilight that his equestrian counterpart is so much nicer than the human version.
What?
Limestone Pie exclaimed.
What do you mean you won't be here? That's what she said.
Filthy Rich answered.
I know she said that, but what does she mean? Don't ask me.
Limestone Pie looked like she was about to blow her top when she calmed down upon Marble Pie, looking at her with her eyes.
Ugh. Sometimes you need to act tougher, Marble, especially when it comes to Her Grace saying something completely out there.
Looking at Nightmare Moon, she couldn't help but be filled with concern over the goddess.
Is something going to happen with the Demon King?
Nightmare Moon nodded.
Even as we speak, Demise continues to resist the seal I have placed upon him. If he were to break free of it, he would slaughter all living things and plunge this land into an eternal darkness from which it will never recover. I had underestimated his power in that I believed the seal would be enough, but now I realize that drastic measures must be taken to prepare for his eventual return. What can we do, Your Grace?
Filthy Rich asked.
There is nothing any of you can do. Sure, we might not be a divine being like you, but we can help out in some way.
Filthy Rich said.
Just tell us what you need us to do and we will do it without question. It's a shame that the other tribes didn't want to stick around to help out. They had to return to their places of origin.
Limestone Pie stomped her foot in response.
They could have waited until after you had done what you're supposed to be doing. As much as it pains me to say it, I have to agree with the Mogma over here in that it's a real shame. We Gorons are here because there are only a handful of us left and we've no home of our own, whilst the Mogmas can only go so far into that volcanic region without roasting their carcasses.
Marble Pie said. Filthy Rich took Limestone's words as a slight insult.
Just cause we can't survive in lava like you Gorons can doesn't make us Mogmas inferior. We can easily get around using our special digging mitts to burrow through any rock.
He then demonstrated by first showcasing the mitts on each of his hands before digging into the ground, where he traveled down an unspecified distance until he came back up a few inches away from where he dug.
As long as we can avoid the lava, me and the boys can survive in a place like that volcano. You're not supposed to compliment that, Marble.
Limestone Pie said.
Oh. I think she has the right idea.
Filthy Rich said. Limestone Pie was about to make a comeback when she saw that Nightmare Moon was struggling.
Here. Let me help you, Your Grace.
Filthy Rich and two other Mogmas nodded at one another before assisting Nightmare Moon, much to Limestone's pleasure.
Thank you everyone. Now about what you want us to do.
Nightmare Moon raised her hand.
There is nothing any of you can do now as it beyond your reach, but, I can tell you that I hope that your lives and those of the future generations of your respective tribes will be good ones and that you will one day welcome back the humans to this land.
Filthy Rich was confused.
Didn't you send them up to the clouds for their safety? Yes, but the time will come when one amongst them in the future shall break through the barrier and return to the surface.
Nightmare Moon answered.
This one shall be known as the new champion who shall ensure the destruction of Demise should he one day return.
Marble Pie then surprised everyone by speaking up.
Where is the current champion?
Limestone Pie nodded.
I agree with my sister. Where did that guy go anyway? I know he was always by your side, Your Grace, and he did inspire us to fight back against those demons despite not having much experience.
That's when her jaw dropped upon realizing that her sister said something other than her usual responses.
Didn't think you had in you to actually say something, Marble. I think there's hope for you yet. Never mind. I would rather not say.
Nightmare Moon said.
If that's what you want, Your Grace. I do not know when Demise shall return, only that he will free himself from the seal that binds him in the place where my temple once stood.
Nightmare Moon said.
When the new champion appears, I wish for you to pass down to your descendants this message. Tell them that they must help my champion fulfill his destiny. Be sure to let the other tribes know of this same message. Gorons, mighty warriors of stone, whose loyalty is immeasurable. I am so sorry so many of you were slaughtered in the battle against Demise and his demonic horde. I hope you are able to find a place that you can call home and begin to rebuild both your society and your lives.
Limestone Pie smiled.
We were honored to have fought alongside you, Your Grace. It was for a good cause.
Marble Pie added. With that, the surviving Gorons and Mogmas departed from Nightmare Moon, with the former returning to their place of origin in the volcanic region of the surface. The Gorons had no place to call their own as they were now so few in number, so they decided to go their separate ways in hopes of making it out there on their own, though any who were related to each other by bloodlines made sure to stay together. Nightmare Moon then looked up at the sky and wondered if the Hylians had gotten used to living up amongst the clouds. As much as she wanted to see them for herself, she knew she had much more to take care of. When the island that contained Nightmare Moon's temple, the statue of the goddess, and the Hylians reached its destination in the clouds, the Hylians didn't know what to make of their new lives given unto them. Many were upset that they had been sent away rather than being allowed to fight alongside Nightmare Moon against Demise and his demonic horde. Others didn't feel the same way and felt relieved knowing their goddess thought of their safety above all else. For a while, this caused a friction to occur between the Hylians, resulting in them forming camps on either end of the island, but they quickly realized that they needed to move past such bickering if they were to survive. At least they were given plenty of land with which to begin a new civilization, but the problem was that they didn't have any materials to work with. In fact, the only materials were the temple itself and an entire forest. While the Hylians didn't like the idea of desecrating Nightmare Moon's sacred temple to build themselves homes, they had no other choice if they wanted to ensure their own survival in their new home. One thing everyone agreed on was that the statue of the goddess would remain intact and would serve as a place of worship where anyone could pray to Nightmare Moon for whatever reason they had. One of the first things they needed to do was to find themselves a leader who could get things done. Unfortunately, Rockhoof was seen as the ideal leader, but they discovered that he had remained behind down on the surface. Twilight Velvet was then suggested as being an ideal leader, but she refused, saying that she lacked a true vision and was more concerned with looking after her ailing husband, who was slowly recovering from an illness. There was one other person who had what it took, yet he didn't really believe himself worthy of the distinction and wanted to find someone else.
Why not take up the mantle of leader?
Twilight Velvet asked as she and the entire group of Hylians had confronted the one they wanted to lead them.
Because I don't think I am worthy to lead any of you. Out of all of us here, you are the one who has the intricate knowledge needed to guide us now, Sunburst.
Sunburst? I couldn't believe it. This one person they believed was worthy of leading them was Sunburst. I had never met him in person, but Princess Twilight told me how he had become quite the important pony in the Crystal Empire by being an official crystal bearer and who had been chosen to teach Baby Flurry Heart how to use her magic. Other than his strong friendship with Starlight Glimmer, Sunburst was seen as a social outcast who preferred knowledge rather than getting out there and making friends. I wouldn't mind meeting him just to see what kind of pony he is.
Knowledge alone doesn't make a good leader. What are you talking about? I lack the physical fortitude necessary to be a leader.
Sunburst said.
Think about it, Twilight Velvet, everyone. While I won't deny that my intellect is remarkably high, I attribute that to my years of reading and studying ancient lore. I'm not exactly what you would call a muscular man. A leader needs both qualities to be successful, and I lack one of them, so me being a leader would merely be counterproductive. Then why not build up your muscles? I haven't done anything of the sort since I was a child. That's not the point. Well, I beg to differ.
Twilight Velvet sighed and slapped her forehead.
If Rockhoof was here with us, he would have been chosen as the leader without question, but he decided to stay behind and fight by the side of her grace. He knew what he wanted to do and went ahead and did it.
Sunburst said as he adjusted his glasses.
Rockhoof was destined for something far greater, and he seized upon his destiny and is sure to be remembered on the surface as having served the goddess Hylia well. I am sure he will be remembered here amongst us for his contributions as well as the vibrant personality he was known for possessing. Besides, I thought you were seen as being ideal to become our new leader. My family is more important.
Sunburst chuckled.
My research is more important. Not the same thing. I believe you are wrong, Twilight Velvet. You're going to lead us, Sunburst, whether you accept the position or not.
Twilight Velvet said.
In order for us to survive up here, we need someone who has the smarts to guide us on the right path and who possesses an incredible amount of charm. If I had a true vision of how our new lives would be, I would have become the leader without a second thought, but I don't, so that leaves only you to take on the job.
The other Hylians began speaking their thoughts on the situation with regards to choosing a new leader. Many proclaimed their support for Sunburst despite his lack of physical prowess, though some questioned this fact and were skeptical but ultimately agreed that he was worthy. Others said that no one else could handle the position because they were clueless, while others claimed he was trying to weasel his way out of an important duty. This arguing went on for a while as Sunburst found himself isolated as his fellow Hylians continued insisting that he was the one who could lead them.
It's only you.
One Hylian said.
You're our best and brightest, Sunburst.
Another Hylian said.
Who cares that you lack physical strength?
A third Hylian said.
You have knowledge on your side, and that makes you an experienced individual who knows how to adapt to any situation, no matter how difficult it can be. You understand things the rest of us don't. Teach us your ways. Lead us. Sunburst. Become our leader and guide us to a better tomorrow.
Twilight Velvet smirked.
As you can see, Sunburst, everyone here wishes for you to become the leader of our new community. I wouldn't want to disappoint them by refusing such a great distinction, but it's your decision to make. We wouldn't be hounding you to accept it if we didn't think you were worthy. In fact, we all know that you're the only one who can prevent us from destroying ourselves. I know that sounds incredibly stupid, but we're being brutally honest.
Sunburst adjusted his glasses.
You truly think I would make a good leader?
Twilight Velvet nodded.
I place my trust in your hands.
The rest of the Hylians nodded in approval, leaving Sunburst unsure of what to say to them. While he didn't like the idea of being the leader of their tribe given he lacked physical strength according to him, they truly believed he would have their best interests in mind and that they trusted his judgment with their lives. How could he possibly refuse? And yet, he still questioned whether he could give them the kind of life Nightmare Moon had hoped for. Sunburst realized a leader was one who earned respect by their accomplishments, being trustworthy, having support, and making life better for those under their protection. Looking back and forth at everyone, Sunburst threw up his hands.
All right. I'll do it. You will lead us. Yes.
The wisdom of the first leader of the town that became known as Skyloft ushered in greatness the likes of which the Hylians had never known. Through such leadership, they were able to develop their community by first building home using materials from the temple, the trees as additional materials to strengthen what they already had, and even utilized the power of the very air itself, enabling them to construct fans that could harness such power. There was even a small lake that provided fresh water and animals from the forest who could provide additional resources, not so much for food as the Hylians weren't seen as carnivores. Within the span of several years, Skyloft slowly began coming into its own, but perhaps the greatest achievement came when the Hylians were able to befriend what they became known for according to historians. Whether it had been planned by Hylia or simply happened out of sheer coincidence, the ancient people of Skyloft bonded with Loft Wings, an ancient race of birds that were gifted with great intelligence. At first, the Loft Wings wanted nothing to do with the Hylians, but persistence paid off and soon both man and bird became as one within several generations of the first meeting. As I turned the next page, the story suddenly went back to Hylia and what she ultimately decided to do. Knowing that demise would one day return, she enacted two plans that were independent of and connected to one another. Her first plan involved creating a sword spirit that she had bonded with the goddess Sword, which resided in the statue of the goddess. She gave the spirit a name, Phi, and her purpose was to guide Hylia's chosen champion towards their destiny and to protect her when she had need of it. Only a chosen few in Skyloft knew of this and pledged to safeguard the secret until the proper time. Her other plan was much more complicated as it involved her giving up her immortal form along with her powers and be reincarnated as a mortal sometime in the future. She did this so that she could use the Triforce as the great goddesses had restricted its use to mortals. Knowing that a divine presence was needed to watch over the surface when she gave up her existence as a goddess, 3 dragons were chosen to guard the 3 provinces, Farron, Eldon, and Lenario. In addition to them, a sky spirit had been commanded to watch over the skies, which also included Skyloft, yet Hylia was not finished yet. The chosen champion would need the key that would open the Sky Keep, the resting place of the Triforce in Skyloft, but to only have one spirit guarding it wasn't enough, and so it was divided into 4 pieces, with each piece guarded by the dragons and by Levia, the Sky Spirit, their task to teach their respective part of the key, a song, to the champion. Hylia also knew her reincarnation would need to remember who she once was in order to play her part, so she stored away her memories within 2 statues that were hidden in 2 sacred springs somewhere. She even had an agent who had been tasked to assist both her and the champion in the future. Finally, she created 2 powerful artifacts known as the Gates of Time. Their true purpose remained a mystery as historians never did figure out what they were for, but a common theory was that one could use the gates to travel through time itself. With everything now taken care of, Hylia gave up her immortal form and disappeared from the world she had protected as commanded by the great goddesses. Her chosen vassals would carry out her plan and waited. For roughly 1,000 years, the surface had since recovered but paled in comparison to what it once was, while Skyloft became exactly what Hylia had hoped it would. Everyone was bonded to a Loft Wing who served as an extension of the people of Skyloft. They were still seen as Hylians, and even additional islands soon began getting inhabited by them as a means of furthering their horizons. There was one place that was deemed forbidden, a place called the Thunderhead where Levius was said to reside, and the remnants of the ancient past could be found in the form of an old building that had fallen into decay. Other than that, Skyloft had prospered, its people having forgotten the surface over time. If there was one place up in Skyloft that was a crowning achievement, it was the Knight Academy. Located near the statue of the goddess, it was a place where students would live and train to become knights dedicated to protecting Skyloft. It was a recent institution that was founded in response to adults believing children needed to make something of themselves. It comprised of a kitchen, a restroom, a classroom, living quarters. Females were on the upper of 2 levels while the males were on the lower level, and several offices. According to the book, the academy was celebrating its 25th anniversary, and so everyone was preparing to mark such an important occasion whilst also preparing for the academy's biggest test.
To think that it has been 25 years since the founding of the Knight Academy. I always believed we were making a difference with the youth, and it's nice to see that even now, they continue to appreciate what we do around here. You know, Alan, you've only been an instructor here for the last 10 years alongside Horwell, but the accomplishments you've both made, not to mention the praise you've received from the students, continues to amaze me even now after all this time. You needn't praise me so much, Headmaster. Both Horwell and I take our jobs as instructors here seriously. True, we had some issues over the years with rowdy students, though they ended up becoming fantastic knights in the end, yet I had hoped many would have continued on with their training instead of retiring. Ah, that couldn't be helped, Alan. They gave up their dreams to begin families. No, I wouldn't say it like that. How would you then? Despite giving up on their dreams, by starting families and having children who aspire to become knights themselves, they will pass on their knowledge to their children, thus allowing them to fully grasp what is expected of being a knight of Skyloft. When she was younger, I would teach Zelda all manner of things regarding being a knight. She sometimes ignored my teachings and believed she could do it on her own without my help, but most of the time, my words reached her and applied them into her own training regimen. Do you regret allowing her to join the academy? I've had nightmares of Zelda getting hurt, Alan, but I cannot let such feelings cloud my judgment. She isn't the little girl who would hold my hand and beg me to tell her a story whenever she was curious. She has become her own independent woman, though sometimes I think she enjoys teasing Link a bit too much.
I immediately recognized Juniper Montage as the instructor known as Alan. Despite everything she did to sabotage the Daring Do movie just because she couldn't play the lead role and using a mirror powered by equestrian magic, she was a really sweet individual who simply wanted to be liked. Good thing Starlight Glimmer helped her understand that getting revenge wasn't the way to go, and otherwise my friends and I would have been lost when the mirror broke. It sounded like Alan always brought out the best in the Knights of the Academy, though she sounded like she had some reservations about Zelda. The headmaster was someone I didn't recognize, so I looked through the magic journal again to see what Princess Twilight had to say. Judging from his physical appearance and what she had provided in her letters, the only one it could be was Prince Rutherford, ruler of a kingdom of yaks known as Yakyakistan. I never knew yaks even existed until Her Highness mentioned about them, which lead me to wonder what other tribes existed in Equestria. Among the yaks, Rutherford was the most stubborn of all, refusing to accept help even when it was obvious that he was in way over his head. For a king, that wasn't what I called a good personality trait. It then occurred to me that both Rutherford and Juniper were talking about Zelda. I knew from Rainbow Dash that there were different incarnations of Zelda, the same with Link, who have existed throughout the ages, so this version was most likely not going to be portrayed by Princess Twilight. That begged the question of who would it be instead. In any case, I decided to continue reading in hopes of learning more about the Knight Academy. It sounded like it would have been a perfect place for someone like Rainbow to attend were any of it real, but given recent events, the possibility of it being real was quite evident.
By the way, Alan,
Prince Rutherford began.
I hear that you're in quite a slump when it comes to your extensive plant collection.
Juniper sighed.
I feel as though I've seen every known kind of plant that exists out there in the world. It would be truly something if I could get my hands on something that no one has ever seen before, but the chances of that happening are slim. Many around Skyloft have tried showing me what they claimed were new plants, but their efforts were in vain. I recognized each and every one they presented me, a prize for being the utmost authority on collecting plants.
Walking up to a door, Juniper opened it and ushered Rutherford to take a closer look at what was on the other side.
As you can see, Headmaster Gabra, I pretty much have everything.
Prince Rutherford began pulling on his beard in deep thought.
Perhaps you should ask one of the students to search the other islands out there in the sky. Perhaps one of them might contain a new plant to add to your collection. I suppose it's worth a try. Be sure to give them extra credit. Of course, as I don't expect a student to go that far out without giving them something good in return. Very good.
Juniper sensed that something was bothering Rutherford, so she chose to inquire.
You seem to be worried about something, Headmaster.
Before continuing, she closed the door to her office out of not wanting her plans to be exposed to any foreign agents.
Is it the upcoming wing ceremony that's bothering you again?
Coughing, Prince Rutherford sighed heavily.
I never could put anything past you, Alan. This year's ceremony is perhaps the most important one, but it doesn't have anything to do with the Academy celebrating 25 years of our institution's existence.
He then waved his hand several times to inform Juniper that he wanted to walk around the Academy, and she nodded before they began their indoor trek.
As you know, Zelda is going to be handing out the prize to the winner this year, a sailcloth she made herself. While I am happy that my daughter is going to be doing this, she has unintentionally made things more complicated. Is it because of Link? Yes.
Prince Rutherford answered.
She really wants him to win this year and move one step closer to becoming a knight. I must admit that Link is certainly talented and could go far with his training.
Juniper said.
But, he does have a tendency to daydream, particularly when flying on his loft wing. If he keeps up with such an attitude, it's possible that he won't be able to pass the ceremony within the next couple of days.
Prince Rutherford shuddered.
If that were to happen, Zelda wouldn't let me hear the end of it. Perhaps we should postpone the wing ceremony?
Juniper asked as they both reached the top of the stairs that went down to the lower level.
I know that would be rather unorthodox considering the others taking part have been waiting all year for the ceremony, but I am willing to speak to Horwell about it. He is presiding over the ceremony this year, so any decision would need to be approved by him. No, that won't be necessary. You're willing to deal with your daughter's antics then? She must remember that I am the headmaster of the academy, and so I cannot be persuaded otherwise even if she is my daughter.
Prince Rutherford answered.
I'm more than willing to be berated by her, so the ceremony will continue as planned. Postponing it for such a trivial matter is nothing but foolishness and would ruin the reputation the academy has been known for. By the way, who else is participating in this year's ceremony? Colin, Stritch, and Groose, along with Link of course.
Princess Rutherford groaned upon hearing that.
I was hoping for more than just 4, but I suppose it's a testament to the difficulty one must endure if they plan on reaching knighthood without taking the easy path through life, if you understand my meaning. I know there is a form of animosity that Groose displays towards Link, but I never did understand why he would do such a thing when everyone is working towards the same goal of becoming knights. It's just childish rivalry. Perhaps, but I hope it doesn't cause any problems.
Walking down the stairs in front of Juniper, Prince Rutherford reached the bottom only to suddenly be surprised by someone who was waiting for him. Juniper recognized who it was and wisely stayed behind Rutherford, who began pounding his chest.
Ah! Zelda! I do wish you would warn me when you appear out of nowhere.
He had been so engrossed with talking about the ceremony that he didn't even notice her.
I wasn't expecting to see you here, my daughter.
To my surprise, Gloriosa Daisy was the one portraying this version of Zelda. Despite ultimately helping her to raise the money to save Camp Everfree and prevent it from being turned into a spa by Filthy Rich, she shouldn't have used equestrian magic in order to give us the best experience the camp had ever seen. I mean, I could understand that she was desperate and had good intentions, but to keep everyone in the dark proved to be her undoing. At least she understood the error of her ways, though I doubted Gloriosa would want to be near any magic for quite some time after almost costing her everything. A footnote revealed something particularly interesting about this incarnation of Zelda. It described her as being the earliest known incarnation and was the only one not born into royalty. That certainly made her unique and someone who was more relatable given her status as just a regular girl as opposed to being a princess who possessed divine powers. It also said that she was the reincarnation of Hylia, though she didn't know it at the time. Well, that was disappointing but hardly not surprising, as someone had to have started the trend of each Zelda possessing divine powers.
I didn't mean to startle you, father,
Gloriosa said.
What are you doing here?
Prince Rutherford asked.
I thought you had plans with Link today. I wanted to speak to you about something. If it has to do with postponing the wing ceremony, I'm afraid that I must put my foot down and say that it will continue as planned.
Gloriosa nodded.
I know that I've been bugging you to hold it off so that Link could get in some practice before the ceremony in a few days, but I really do want him to be the winner this year as opposed to say someone like Groose. That is still no excuse to want the ceremony postponed, my dear. Which is why I wanted to ask if I could give Link some special training.
Prince Rutherford was caught off guard when Gloriosa said that.
I was expecting you to continue pressuring me into postponing the ceremony, but this is a different matter. I am well aware that you want him to win, given you two have been friends ever since you were children, but I'm not sure if it would be a good idea for you to do that. The other students might protest, which would only cause further headache in an already tense situation. Link knew ahead of time that the wing ceremony was coming up and he has had plenty of time to prepare himself, so if he failed to pass the exam, he only has himself to blame. That's why I want to help him. But, Zelda.
Gloriosa stomped her foot on the ground.
If Link doesn't win, I don't know what I will do. There is no need to panic, my dear. How can I when Link's very future is hanging in the balance? This is not the end of the world, Zelda,
Prince Rutherford said.
Link has progressed far better than any of us expected, but there comes a time when even the best and brightest reach a dead end with their training. If Link were to fail to pass the exam, he can simply try again next year, though he would have to relearn everything. I know this isn't what you wanted me to say, but to become a successful knight, he must be ever vigilant, never shirking his duties, and having a perfect bond with his loft wing.
Gloriosa felt crestfallen yet realized that her father was correct. As much as it pained her, she knew that Link had been getting lax with his training, resulting in her confidence in his abilities taking some emotional damage. While it was true that he could just try the exam again the next time it came around, she couldn't deal with the thought of him being behind while someone else moved on ahead, that one person in particular being Groose. To give him special treatment would be viewed as playing favorites, which would be deemed an unfair advantage by the other students and would be forced to give them the same thing. She was in quite the bind, but she knew there had to be a way to figure something out without making the situation worse. Thinking it over in her head, Gloriosa realized that giving direct training to Link would be her attempting to manipulate the ceremony, but what if she merely gave him a couple of pointers instead? Or she could take him out for a flight around Skyloft using their respective loft wings in hopes that he would get in some practice without her having to suggest anything. While the latter option came off as being manipulative in nature, Gloriosa was desperate to see him emerge victorious.
I have a suggestion, father. You can give Link special training. What about some pointers?
Gloriosa asked.
I could give him a suggestion or two and hope that he would take the hint that he needs to prepare. That should be well within reason, as he would be doing it all his own despite me having mentioned something. Or, I was thinking we could go out for a flight on our loft wings and he would naturally feel the need to practice for the ceremony, again without me saying anything.
Prince Rutherford smiled.
You really do want him to succeed, don't you?
Gloriosa nodded.
He will make a fine knight someday, father. Then you may give him a few pointers or go on a flight around Skyloft. Thank you, father. Remember not to do anything reckless. I won't.
As Gloriosa turned around and walked off, a cheerful demeanor exuding from both her body and her footsteps, Juniper walked up to Prince Rutherford and placed her hand on his shoulder, a concerned look on her face.
Are you sure that was the right thing to do, Headmaster Gabara? I know she is very passionate about wanting Link to win the ceremony and move one step closer to knighthood, but I fear her actions, while honorable, will only cause Groose and the others to surely complain.
Prince Rutherford nodded.
It will be just fine, Alan. How certain are you of that? Very certain.
Prince Rutherford answered.
Remember that Zelda has always looked out for Link ever since they were children. No matter what the situation, she would always watch him to ensure nothing bad ever happened. Deep down, I know he appreciates what she does. I also know that he looks out for her in his own way. I trust Zelda's judgment despite having some slight concern that she might overdo things a little. Guess we'll know in a few days when the wing ceremony takes place.
Walking outside of the Knight Academy, Gloriosa breathed the air so that she could take in the majestic beauty that was Skyloft. Hylians lived in a variety of homes that were located across the island, yet other buildings, such as the bazaar, housed a plethora of shops including a cafe where one could find all of their shopping needs or to sit down for a spell and have a drink before resuming their business. One shop was different in that it was mobile and thus moved around the island, though some say it was difficult to reach unless you could get the attention of the one who owned it. There was also a large outdoor foyer where Hylians could gather and hang out and was the most popular location in all of Skyloft. Next door to the academy was a sparring hall where knights could go to practice their swordsmanship skills, though the facility also offered training for those who wanted to specialize in defensive measures. As Gloriosa made her way over to the foyer, she greeted everyone who passed her by, and when she got there, she came to a sudden stop when she heard the voice of a certain someone who made her feel very uncomfortable, resulting in her cringing.
Hey. Why hello there, Zelda. Oh. Groose. I wasn't expecting to see you here.
I didn't recognize who was portraying this Groose character, so once more I turned to Princess Twilight's notes for clarification. According to what she wrote, the one portraying Groose was a pony, by the name of Featherbangs from Starlight Glimmer's old village, but this was the human version. Her Highness had never met him, so her knowledge stems from what she had been told about him from Big Macintosh the pony version, who then told Applejack, who then told Her Highness. When not experiencing nervousness, Featherbangs proclaimed himself a real ladies' man, relying on smooth talk, over-the-top theatrics, and more in order to stand out. He sounded like a stereotypical jock, only with some humility given that it was a facade.
Funny meeting you here,
Featherbangs said.
The feeling isn't mutual. Oh, you're just saying that because you care, duh.
Gloriosa felt like throwing up.
I'm surprised that you're not hanging out with Colin and Stritch. Usually, the three of you are always getting into trouble in addition to giving Link a real hard time, so seeing you on your caught me off guard.
Hearing the name Link made Featherbangs angry, resulting in his face turning red, but he quickly calmed down upon seeing Gloriosa's face.
Well, I just wanted to have some time to myself without needing them two around. I was thinking of going to the bazaar and was just about to when I noticed you walking by, and so I decided to walk on over and see what you were doing.
The expression on his face made Gloriosa uneasy, but she recognized that look from anywhere.
Since you're here and all, Zelda, would you? You know. I'd love to, Groose, but I'm much too busy right now. Don't be like that. I'm serious. Hey. Oh, I'm being serious too.
Gloriosa suddenly waggled her finger in front of Featherbangs' face, much to his surprise.
Listen, Groose. You do know that the wing ceremony is coming up in a few days, right? I hope you and your friends have been training because otherwise you might not win and you'll have to go through the training all over again.
Featherbangs laughed in response.
Ha! Of course I'm ready for it. Me and the boys have been practicing for weeks. Is that a fact? Why would I ever lie to you, Zelda? From what I've been seeing from you three as of late, you've been neglecting your training and instead have been picking on Link again.
Again, hearing that name made Featherbangs angry, though this time he wasn't able to calm down as quickly.
Why bother talking about him when he's not even here? It's not like he'll ever amount to anything unlike the two of us.
His face went back to normal only for steam to come spurting out of his nose, which Gloriosa didn't notice.
Heh. Come to think of it, I heard you were the one who'll be giving out the prize at the end of the ceremony this year. I've got an extra incentive to win for sure and receive it from you. I can imagine us both right now on top of the statue.
Gloriosa then elbowed Groose in the stomach.
Would you please focus and not daydream about your fantasies? You're cute when you're angry,
Featherbangs said, ignoring the pain coming from his stomach.
But seriously, me and the boys are prepared for the exam, and even though those guys will do their best, they know that I'll be the one crossing that finish line first. Let's see if that gusto is more than just that. So how about we go somewhere together? I'm afraid that I'll be seeing Link presently,
Gloriosa answered.
He and I have been planning our little get-together for over a month, but I'm going to surprise him with something he definitely won't be expecting. Hopefully, it will give him an incentive to do his best at the exam. But, I think I will pay a visit to the bazaar myself before seeing Link. I've been meaning to check something there for a while now and I do have enough rupees. Anyway, I'll see you later, Groose. Say hello to Colin and Stritch for me whenever you get the opportunity.
As Gloriosa walked off towards the bazaar, Featherfangs stood there in complete silence until he snapped and began stomping the ground.
Link, Link, Link. What in the world does she see in that loser anyway? He's nothing but a rank amateur who doesn't even understand the first thing about flying his bird. Speaking of which, I just came up with a brilliant idea worthy of my genius, and I'm the smartest there is at the academy. Duh. It'll be easy getting Colin and Stritch on board, but it won't be easy finding where it flies off to. In any case, I'll make sure Link never gets a chance to race.
Wow. I never thought I would actually despise one of these characters other than Ganondorf, but Groose had just become the second to be given that distinction. Everything about him makes me annoyed, and yet, he reminded me of how I used to act when I didn't understand friendship. He wasn't necessarily evil, but rather he was just a bully who was jealous of the Link of this era, all because Link had something Groose could never have. Good thing Zelda constantly put him in his place as a means of keeping him in check, but it seemed like her efforts were in vain as Groose continued to be nothing but a massive headache for Link. It says here that Groose and his friends captured Link's loft wing, a crimson loft wing, seen as one of, if not the most rare version of their kind, and managed to imprison it behind some wooden planks in their bid to prevent him from taking part in the wing ceremony, which took place a few days later. Fortunately, with Zelda's help along with another student at the academy who had been threatened into keeping quiet due to accidentally discovering what happened, Link managed to find his partner and was able to take part in the exam. Fortunately, Zelda was able to give him some pointers before this problem happened and he was raring to go. The exam consisted of collecting a special trinket from another loft wing, with the first to do so being declared the winner. Aside from no cheating, the race itself was fairly simple and would usually last no longer than 10 minutes. In the Academy's entire history, there had never been a year where no student was able to claim the trinket, a small statue of a loft wing of little value financially but worth a lot in terms of personal achievement. Despite how simplistic it was in concept, the exam proved a real challenge as one needed to be in perfect sync with their partner loft wing or else you would fail. Despite him and his cronies trying everything in their power to prevent him from winning, Link was successfully able to complete his exam. By winning, he moved one step closer to achieving knighthood in addition to earning the prize, a sailcloth, a replica of the one that Hylia made for her champion during the ancient battle against Demise. Unfortunately, things would turn dire after the ceremony was finished. While flying around Skyloft with Link, a tornado of unnatural properties came out of nowhere, and abducted Zelda, dragging her down to the surface, prompting Link into going after her. He would soon discover that this had all been preordained along with his destiny as Hylia's champion. I stopped reading as the story would lead into events that covered a video game in the series referred to as Skyward Sword. As much as I wanted to keep on reading in order to find out what happened to those who were involved in the renewed conflict against Demise, I felt that I learned enough about the ancient past and felt keen on looking at something that occurred most recently in the timeline. Then I remembered that this edition of the Hyrule Historia had a new chapter which historians claimed took place at the end of one of the timelines, though they don't know which one it was and continue to debate it even now. Unlike the other chapters which had been given some alterations aimed at correcting certain inconsistencies noted in the previous edition, this one was completely fresh, so the chances of me running into something inconsistent with earlier sections of the Hyrule Historia was really high. But, before I delve into this new content, I needed to take a break, as reading all that about Skyloft and the ancient battle had worn me out. I think after reading this next chapter, I will stop reading the book completely. While it would mean ignoring certain events, I could only take so much before it became too much. End of chapter.